everybody. I'm Karen Hartglass. You're listening to It's All About Food. Thank you for joining me. This is going to be a fun one, I promise you. I am here with Christen Mailler, the author of a new book, Average Vegan Teen. And we'll talk about the title a little bit more in a moment because average is crossed out. So I'm not exactly sure how we're supposed to read that, but I really enjoyed the book. And we're going to talk a bit about it and then about Chris.
Christen Mailler is an artist and author with a BFA from the Tufts School of the Museum of Fine Arts. She lives with her husband and 2 daughters on Boston's North Shore. Ms. Christen Mailler and Dr. Taft are the founders of Vegan Publishers, which was launched in 2013 in order to raise awareness of the vital importance of veganism in creating a more compassionate and just society. They had been recently married and were expecting the first of their 2 daughters. They started the small publishing company because they were struck by how limited the literature was on veganism. Vegan Publishers came into being in order to elevate the voices of vegan advocates and the animals themselves.
So welcome to It's All About Food.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's talk about the title.
Okay.
Do we say it's Average Vegan Teen? Because you've got it crossed out and then you've got these brackets around vegan. So how are we supposed to say
I know it's a little, yes, it's a little interpretive there, isn't it? Well, I say vegan teen.
Okay.
You can say average vegan teen. I've said different ones. I've said the whole title. Sometimes I just shorten it to vegan teen, but Average Vegan Teen is the title, and you can and should feel free to read even though it's crossed out. But she is not so average. That is why it gets that
right
through.
But I guess it's important to see the average crossed out because that gives us a message.
Right.
Okay, before we talk about the book, well, we're always going to be talking about the book, but I read a lot. And for the last few decades, I have not read a lot of fiction. And when I was younger, I used to read a lot of fiction. And then somehow it morphed. This podcast had something to do with it, which I started in 2009, because I tend to read more serious books about all the horrible things that are going on this planet and what we can do about it. And that doesn't leave a lot of time for fiction. And so I had your book on my list to read because I always read the books from the authors that I'm going to be talking to. And it was Saturday and it was raining. And it just seemed like the perfect time to cuddle up with a book and read. And I thoroughly enjoyed it because, one, I haven't read fiction in a long time. And it was just nice to relax into a story. And I didn't have to focus on facts and all kinds of crazy things that are not so crazy, but important. But I didn't need it for the moment. And it really brought me back to when I was a teenager. So
that time.
I think it's really well written, and I enjoyed that part of it.
Well, thank you. I'm glad I was able to transport you to that really confusing yet somehow magical time in our lives, and awkward and scary and filled with anxiety, and all of it is something I remember from my teen years.
It's funny because I started on the vegetarian path when I was 15, and a little later than the star in your story.
Right. Kess is on the verge of becoming 13.
And I had a best friend in 6th grade, and we went on being close in junior high school. In high school, she moved away the last year, but we started to not be as close. And we're in touch a little bit on Facebook, but reading this book made me reach out to her and say, we have to catch up.
Wow. Okay, cool.
And the funny thing is, we're both vegan now. We weren't back then. So there was something going on.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So I always ask this question. I'm sure you've been asked this question before. Why did you write this book?
Well, I will have a vegan teen myself in a few years. And I actually when I started writing this book a few years ago, it really was because there was a gap in the market. There were plenty of beautiful, colorfully illustrated children's books. And then there were plenty of adult books. But there weren't any fiction stories with vegan protagonists in this upper middle grade reading genre. So I was just thinking, you know, I think there really needs to be a chapter book for this age group. You know, it's like these are kids that are probably, you know, having all kinds of mixed emotions and feelings and dealing with things in a whole other way than you do when you're little, if you're being raised vegan anyway. And there's a lot of teens that decide to go vegan and come into that at that time in their lives. And I wanted there to be a book for them, and I wanted to write the book I would have wanted to read when I was that age. And this is that book. I write what I would want to read. And vegan or not, this is a book, because I was not a vegan teen. But I would have still really wanted this type of book. I was hungry for anything coming of age when I was 11 and 12, you know, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. I was hungry for books like that. You know, I would just devour them, always looking for coming of age. I was obsessed with the Wonder Years. So there was something about that was really captivating to me. So
I'm curious, when did you go vegetarian/vegan?
Well, I was vegetarian for a little while before Casey and I got married, and I planned this big vegetarian wedding and everything. And then my husband, Casey, said, you know, I think I'd like to go vegan. And I was like, are you kidding me? I just planned the whole wedding vegetarian. He's like, well, I'm sure they can give us a vegan option. And I'm like, but the cake, you know, I'm like, come on, I already did all this planning. You're going to tell me this now, like a month before the wedding? It's like, well, I feel like I really have to do this for my health. This is, you know, we've been vegetarian, but this is the next step. I don't feel like there is any point in waiting. And I was like,
wow.
I was like, all right. And for me, I was just at that time, I guess I would have been, you know, 29 years old, and thinking like, sure, I'll give it a shot. Vegetarian was not a hard transition for me at all. So we began delving into the world of vegan, and this will 10 years ago now. So for a little over 10 years now, I've been vegan. So this was 10 years ago, and there were not as many options as there are now, let me tell you. As you probably remember a time when you couldn't just walk in the grocery store and get vegan cheese, you know? So yeah, then it was even trickier at that time, but we were still having fun finding the restaurants that were offering vegan things and enjoying kind of diving into that whole world. But at that point, it was still just a diet. There was nothing. It was really, like, I would say, plant-based. I hadn't thought about what I was wearing or animal exploitation in any way. It really wasn't. Casey was the first to make that ethical connection about, hey, this is just, I feel like this is morally wrong. And he started, you know, opening my eyes to a lot of things like earthlings and, you know, all the I call it the newborn vegan stuff, you know, when you're just, you cry all the time. You're like horrified. You just can't believe it. Why didn't I realize this?
Yeah.
Casey made that connection first. And he really became quite passionate about the ethical side of it. And at that time, we were discussing, I had become pregnant, and we were discussing how we were going to raise our children. And he's like, well, we have to raise our kids vegan. And I hadn't done much research on my own as far as like nutrient wise, what does a pregnant person need going through this? Is this safe? I had all these questions, but I was like, okay, I think we can do this. I had a lot of materials at my disposal, and I started looking online and thinking, I think we can raise a vegan child. I think we can do this. By all accounts, it seems like an incredibly healthy way of eating and all of that. And we'll teach our kids about our values, basically. But at this point, I have to be honest with you, I still hadn't made that connection. I was still at that point just kind of going along with Casey and what he thought would be, the healthiest way to raise our children and all that. But once I gave birth to my daughter and I started breastfeeding her, I made that connection. And once I did, I don't think I stopped crying for like 3 days straight, because I was learning about how, the animals are separated from their mothers, and they're not allowed their mother's milk. And I will start to tear up every time I think about it now, because I was holding this precious little baby, and I couldn't imagine, being separated, or, her not being able to get that,
Yep.
And then having my milk that I made taken away from me and given to someone else. I was just like, blew my mind. Okay. So that was the moment when I was fully that was the moment that I became a true ethical, more like, it was more than just a diet for me at that point. I think that was like, I think for everyone, they can probably feel the moment when they feel that connection. And up until then, I think a lot of people are like, I'll leave it open-ended. If I don't feel good on this, I can always go back, but that was that moment for me. And I think a lot of vegans have that moment. They're like, I can never go back, because I'm not even the same person anymore after making that connection, So that was, my daughter will be 10 in August. My oldest daughter will be 10 in August. So that was that journey for me. And that's how I came to that.
Such a great story. I'm just curious, what made you go vegetarian before vegan? Was that a health reasons or ethical, or what was behind that?
Well, I guess I would say I dabbled in vegetarianism. So I would try it out, but maybe not stick with it for very long, and then kind of go back.
Okay.
And then this had happened when I met Casey. I would say mostly vegetarian, but still like, hey, if it wasn't convenient, then I wasn't.
Sure.
What I mean?
What was the motivation behind that? You thought it was healthier, or what?
Well, Casey was vegetarian, and we started dating, and everywhere we would go, we went to vegetarian restaurants, and he liked to order things that we could share. So we always would just order stuff that we could share with each other. Now, I didn't really love meat, but this is the story, is that I think it was our first date actually, that he ordered a vegetarian dish, and he had suggested several. And I said, no, I'm going to have the fish. And he did not, he didn't tell me at that time, but he was like,
okay.
And then I got it. And the next time I ordered one of the other vegetarians, so we could share. But that was the last time that I had fish or any animal, was that. So, because once I was pulled back into vegetarian living while we were dating, and he knew all the great restaurants in Boston that had wonderful vegetarian food. I mean, it was just, I wasn't missing out on anything, so that was super easy. And it just kind of rolled along like that up until right before our wedding, I'd say. Yeah.
Well, the two of you must have a very special relationship from the beginning, because you were willing to see his side and open up, and he was willing to be a little patient for you to see what he was doing. And there had to be something there to allow both of you to do that.
I do feel like we're on the same page about most things. We don't have disagreements about parenting and stuff like that. We're really on the same page about most things. And I think when it comes to a lot of things, if he's like, hey, have you thought about it like this? I'm like, no, I'm pretty flexible. I'm pretty open-minded. So I'm willing to. And he is too, actually. So yeah, I think we do find ourselves on the same page about those big critical life things, which you need to have when you're raising kids together. Because let me tell you, I can't even imagine trying to raise vegan kids, one parent not vegan. I think that would be really, really difficult.
Yeah, I know people doing it, and it is challenging. Yeah.
But
so I'm just curious about the wedding. So a vegetarian wedding is a lot easier for caterers and people not used to doing vegan weddings than a vegan wedding, because people don't know how to make cakes without eggs and dairy.
No, we had already picked out the cake and everything. Everything was set. The menus were set. It was just us. We got, they had made a special vegan meal for just us, but everyone else had one of the two vegetarian options. And we had a big, at cocktail, a big Mediterranean spread. And so there were plenty of vegan things to eat, like hummus, vegetables, pita, but there's all kinds of different things. So, but just wasn't the cheeses.
Right. Okay. I like to always say, there is always hummus.
There's always hummus. Yeah. I just had it for lunch, actually.
Well, I've been vegan for 35 years, and I've seen the big transition, but truly the last 5 years have been very explosive. And I've mentioned this a few times on this program, but the vegan cheeses, like just in the last couple of years, have really gone nuts. No pun intended.
It's gotten so much better.
We have a vegan cheese shop in Manhattan that is amazing. Bries and rind cheeses, and they're cheese. They're just cheese, but they're not made from animal.
Well, I might have to pay you a visit soon, because that sounds heavenly.
Yeah, you can order from them online on the East Coast. They don't ship across country because it has to be chilled, but it's called Riverdale. Riverdale.
Ooh. Okay.
Yeah, really good stuff.
Thanks for the tip.
Or if you just come to New York, and I'll show you around.
Sure thing. Sounds like a fun day.
Yeah. Okay. Well, now I know a little bit more about you. And
there's some background for you.
And you and Casey, and you've decided to raise your children vegan, and you have 2 now, right? Yeah. And I'm just curious, how's that going? Before we'll get back to the book in a minute, but I want to get some background.
Raising vegan kids has been an absolute breeze. I have to say, it's not difficult. I think I thought it would be harder than it would be. When I was pregnant, I was very worried. Is she going to get everything that she needs? Where is she going to get her protein? And, all these questions that you ask when you don't, I think when you're so accustomed to thinking that a vegan diet is lacking. It comes from the perspective that a vegan diet is somehow deficient or lacking in what the human body needs. And so I was coming from that perspective thinking, this is going to be really difficult. I'm going to have X, Y, Z vitamin supplementation and all of this. And, now of course there's certain vitamins that you naturally want to supplement on, like B12 and D, which is common on the East Coast for
everybody. So
the normal things we do, but it wasn't like this, oh my gosh, how are we going to keep her alive situation that when I was first going vegan, I was kind of thinking, well, it's kind of at that time I felt it's kind of a radical thing to do. I didn't know any other vegan parents. Of course, now things are different. And with my second child, it was just like,
easy,
just roll right in.
easy peasy. Were there any books that helped you in raising your children nutritionally? Any in particular?
I can't even recall at this time, because any of that reading that I did, it would have been done 10 years ago or so. I think I did have a book about vegan pregnancy. I don't remember what it was called.
Just curious.
But I quickly realized that all of it was just really common sense. There wasn't any special instruction manual that you need to.
Good for you. Absolutely.
To do this, So I kind of quickly got that, and then didn't worry about it after I read and what I felt I needed to read, and understood what I felt I needed to understand about how to proceed. So wasn't.
I remember Dr. Furman had his Disease Proof Your Child book, which was very helpful. And Brenda Davis and Reshma Shah, MD, recently came out with a book called Nourish, which isn't just for pregnancies and babies, but kind of guides you throughout your child's life. Very good book. So I just thought I'd mention a couple of those.
That's awesome. We need those resources out there. I guess I could say I'm probably at this point pretty lazy nutritional vegan mom. I'm not the one, over here throwing kale salad and quinoa and almonds at my kids. I'm not that type of person to begin with. So, I like to eat healthy, but I'm not, the vegan thing isn't primarily about health for us. So it's, we like to eat, processed meat substitutes and things like that. We do indulge in unhealthy processed foods, not all the time, but I wouldn't say that I am, the mom that's trying to keep every molecule of sugar away from my children or anything like that.
Do you have conversations about eating animals and not eating animals with your children? I would think that's important.
So Lena, my older daughter, we did have conversations with her, but it wasn't anything we had to persuade her to do. It just seemed like, why would I eat an animal? That's insane. Right? So to her, it just seemed completely normal. Like, why would you do that? And she is also really the kind of kid who, she got the ethical connection right away. It made a lot of sense to her. And I never had any difficulties like going to birthday parties and stuff, I never had to be like, you can't have this or you can't have that. She'd just look at the birthday cake and be like, are there eggs in there? And be like, yeah. She'd be like, can I have my cupcake that you brought? And I'd be like, sure. Because she doesn't want it. She's never felt like I have said to, in the beginning, I did say, well, there's cake here. You can have that one. It has eggs in it. Or if I say that to her when she was little, she'd look at me like, why would I? It's the same as me saying, you can have that birthday cake, but there's a little bit of dog poop in it. That's the exact same reaction she would have if I said, but there's eggs in there, or that's made with cow's milk or something like that. So to her, it was never like, I never felt like I had to hold her back. She just literally just didn't want it.
You got it. Good.
And
I like that, saying it's just got a little dog poop in it. If people would only understand, it's just got a little butter in it. It's like dog poop.
To her, that's just disgusting. Like, why would anyone want that? Yep. So it was just really easy with her. She was her own little advocate in her own way. I think she liked to tell people about why do you eat animals, or sometimes she would ask her own questions to people, or we have these conversations. And at the time my dad wasn't vegan, but he has since gone vegan. And
Well done.
brought him over to that side, and she's really bright and compassionate child. And then we had number 2, and when you have your older sister like that, I mean, there's hardly anything we have to do. I mean, she's born into a world where, you know, you have every food that you like to eat and there's no animals in it. Why would you even think to choose? And, you know.
Now, do your kids go to school, or are they taught at home?
So Cecily, she goes to preschool, and she will be entering kindergarten next year. And Lena, she stopped going to school. We homeschooled her during coronavirus, era of coronavirus. We ended up homeschooling her for that year where they were going to put everyone into virtual education through the school system, and it was pretty bad.
Yeah.
I thought, you know what, I'm here. I think we can do this. And she ended up liking it so much that we continued through grade school. And now she will be entering 5th grade. Now she will be entering school starting in the fall, with her sister entering kindergarten. So who knows, maybe I'll finally have time to write a sequel.
Well, that was one of my questions coming later. Because that's the hardest for children, and you touch on it in the book a little bit, but there's all the social influence of what friends and other people are doing outside. And when kids go to school and they're eating differently, there can be some awkwardness, some bullying, some all kinds of things. So I was just curious.
Lena never experienced that in her preschool or 1st grade time.
Good.
Although I think if anyone's making people uncomfortable, it's probably my kids making other people uncomfortable, because they're being like, why are you eating that? Or I'm not saying now. Lena's quite mature. She can read the room, and she's got a very high EQ. So she's not making anyone uncomfortable. But in the early years, you know, when kids have no filter, you know, I do remember stories from preschool where, you know, they having conversation, they would report to me conversations that they had with their teacher about, you know, well, my teacher said that eggs are healthy for her, and you know, and I'm like, okay, so they clearly had conversations with their teachers and possibly their peers, and getting, you know, hearing what they have to say about that, which is fine. I have no issue with that. They will all eventually, you know, go out into the world and have their own discussions and learn from other people, and hopefully other people learn from them.
Right. Okay, this is good. Now the book. Vegan teen. Vegan teen. I'm not saying average. I don't want to talk about the story, but because I don't want to give any of that away. But
okay, no spoilers.
Well, I mean, it's your book, but I don't want to give any spoilers away. But I'm curious about a number of things. So we have families that are divorced, and the dynamic there. In fact, there was one family that was already divorced, and another family looked like the couple was splitting. Why did you feel that was an important part of the story?
Well, a big part of my interest is psychology, and I do find relationships so fascinating, especially triangles and the dynamics there. So when I'm writing the characters, I'm taking into consideration all of those dynamics and the triangles that they are a part of, whether they are on the outside of that triangle or not, and how that's affecting how they are reacting to other people and things like that. I also felt like, you know, having divorced parents is not an uncommon situation either. And I, felt like part of the story works is because she has to go off and have this time in the summer, and that was a vehicle for that. But in that, I also wanted her to have one parent who was vegan, which is her mom, and just to show that different perspective there. The other family, that relationship is more mysterious. We don't know a whole lot about why those parents separated, but whatever happened there affects how the characters behave and react and interact with each other and with Kessa, the main character in the story.
So this other family, the children are unschooled, and I don't know how many people are familiar with unschooling. I know it's become more popular, and I have a close friend who unschooled his kids, and it had some interesting outcomes. But it was funny because I was really relating to it, because in his household, the house was always a mess.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah. And I don't know that many people who do the unschooled method, and maybe you might want to explain what that is, but there's a lot of freedom involved. Part of the freedom could be not having to clean up anything.
I mean, I can only imagine. I will be the first to say that I am very pro alternative styles of education. I homeschooled my own daughter for years. I did not unschool her. I definitely homeschooled her, so she had schooling. But
tell us what the difference is.
Unschooled is there is no structure at all. Parents do not force any type of learning curriculum or schedule on their kids. It's completely child-led, and if a kid wants to spend an entire year learning about the things in the backyard, then that's totally cool and fine. Or perhaps just life skills and baking or whatever you like to do. Just a very free and easy sort of child-led atmosphere. Although I think level of parental involvement is going to vary from person to person who decides to do this. I'm not going to say that every kid who's unschooled has no parental involvement. Right. It just so happens that in this book, the parents are not around very often in that one family situation.
It was interesting because, and I have no facts here, but I've found the people that I've been exposed to that when they're either unschooled or homeschooled, the children tend to be very bright. I don't know what the statistics are on that, but all the ones I know now, maybe it's just the people I know are bright and their children are bright. I don't know, but it just seems it works.
Yeah. We've been pleased with how things have turned out here for us, and I'm excited for Lena as she begins her proper schooling journey in a Montessori school starting in 5th grade. Cecily will also be starting in Montessori, so this is going to be a little bit different style than public school, but I think it'll be a great transition for Lena coming from the homeschool environment to going to Montessori.
It was funny because your description of this home where the children were unschooled and the mom is an artist and she wasn't very present was really good, to the point where I wanted to go and clean their house. Oh. Just hearing about how everything was sticky and disorderly, and I was just like, let me just do the dishes and tidy things.
Well, I have to tell you, some of that was there was a family that I would babysit for when I was 11 and 12. And I actually, their house made me feel like that. Let me just say, they weren't unschooled kids. They went to school, but this was a single mom, you know, who was raising, and I'm, you know, sure it was hard to do that. But just in general, I feel like there were some parallels drawn between that situation. And so, I mean, there's inspiration drawn from all different personal life experiences in this book.
Okay, you said before with your family, your diet is more motivated by ethics rather than by health. And in the book, the kids are always eating snacks that aren't necessarily the healthiest. Where does that come from? And where are you in that whole scenario? Do you eat a lot of Oreo cookies?
I don't actually. I don't, but I think I really wanted, you know, I wanted people to know that vegans also like to eat, you know, normal, like junky food sometimes. And it's not, I think a lot of people outside of it have this perspective that, you know, if you say, hey, I'll bring the cake for the dinner party, everyone's like, oh my God, is she going to use buckwheat flour and it's going to be some like healthy cake, you know, when in fact it's the opposite of the kind of thing that I would do. I make like a very decadent vegan cake, and it's not about, you know, quinoa bowls and stuff. You know, I want comfort food. I make vegan mac and cheese. I make, you know, vegan enchiladas and vegan lasagna and stuff like that. So I wanted to show that, you know, vegans like to eat that kind of food. It's not all, you know, kale salads and almond milk every day.
Yeah, there is a wide range of what is considered vegan, and going from junk food vegan to healthy, whole food, plant-based vegan.
Mm-hmm.
But the market shows that there's plenty of junk food out there that's vegan.
There is.
Somebody's buying it.
Certainly. Yeah, certainly. And, you know, I personally don't, we don't have Oreo cookies and stuff like that in our house. We don't eat a ton of processed junk, but we sure love our vegan baked goods from the restaurants that have them that we like. My daughter is not a snacky type of person at all. She likes to go from one hearty meal to the next. She's either hungry or she's not. That's how she's always been. And she also doesn't have a sweet tooth. So
wow, you were really lucky.
I'm a savory. Neither of us. I mean, when I tell you she didn't have a problem with cakes at birthday parties growing up, it's mostly because she didn't even really want it that much. She's bring me the chips. I don't want the frosting or any of that. She's always had the salt tooth. She's just like me. We are, if I like it, I know she's gonna like it. We like savory, salty foods, and maybe like a little dark chocolate, like a nibble, if you have a little bit of a sweet craving, and that's all it takes. And we're like,
were you always that way before vegan?
Pretty much, yeah. I have to say I've always been a really salty, savory type of person. And if I did eat sweets, I'd always feel like I had to have already eaten something satisfying, and then I would be wanting the sweet thing. Just like my daughter Lena, she would never, like, she wouldn't just want a sweet thing, you know. If she was hungry, she said, well, I'm not hungry, I don't want anything sweet, I want real food, you know. My other daughter, on the other hand, she loves her sweets. She's got a sweet tooth, so we have to keep her supplied in the healthy sweets like fruits and things like that, because she could easily go for lollipops and just the frosting off of cupcakes for her meals if we let her.
Again, I don't want to give away anything in the book, but the dad ultimately says he wants to try and be vegan. And I wonder, was any of that taken from your own personal life with your father,
you know,
deciding to be vegan?
No, no,
Okay.
it was purely that was purely its own thing. My dad did make his own connection years ago, and he also went from it's just a diet, open-ended, going back to eating meat, and then but eventually he had that moment where it
Wow.
was not. So yeah, he is ethically, he's made that, I don't know, whatever that bridge is that we walk over when we go from this is a plant-based thing to this is a vegan thing now. He's already there. But no, in the story, that's not, I didn't draw it from personal experience anyway.
Okay.
It just so happens that the other parent, it would have been one parent that this habit. So if she had mostly lived with her dad and gone to visit with her mom, it would have been the mom who, so that just how that arc was set up.
Okay. Just curious.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, just a little bit about the book. So right from the beginning, we're in this dynamic of what it's like to be a teenager, a teenage girl with other girlfriends. And there was this great teenage energy in there with all of the challenges that they create for themselves, the things that they concern themselves with, things that are important. And you know, sometimes this can extend into adulthood, the crazy things we make up in our minds, in our relationships. Is any of that based on your own personal life, or you just
absolutely
made it all up? Okay.
No, lots of it is, you know, I was reaching back to that time in my life 100% to write those characters. And there is elements of myself in Ketha, there's elements of myself in Toria and in Maddie, and there's elements of myself in Arthur and in Millie, and all of these characters. I mean, it's not all me, you know, they have it's their own thing, but I feel like there's pieces of me in little pieces of me in every one of those characters. So I definitely had a lot of moments where I was sitting and reflecting on, you know, what was I thinking at that time, and how is my character thinking differently about this than I did at that time, and or how is this character thinking similarly about this as I did at that time. So I was definitely reflecting a lot about that time in my life. One of the major themes of the Beatles, the connection to the Beatles, I was a major Beatle fan. So in fact, the music of the Beatles and the 60s kind of colored my entire coming of age personal life and memories of that time. If I put on a song, it just brings me right back, you know. So
I'm curious, how did you get exposed to that music? Because it wasn't from your time.
Well, I probably got a hold of a bunch of my parents' CDs that they had, and they had some records and CDs with the Beatles music. And my best friend, who's one of my best friends to this day, also at the same time was getting a hold of the music too, and we'd be like, have you heard this? Oh my gosh, look at this song. And we got really into it, and then that led into, I think, you know, just listening to the oldies station on the radio, which was, you know, on 100% of the time during my years as 11, 12, 13-year-old. I was always listening to the oldies, and I started buying my own CDs and albums from songs that I would hear on the radio of the oldies. I mean, like, do you have Donovan? Okay, do you have the Moody Blues? I'm looking for this album with this song. And pretty soon I have my own collection of music from the 60s.
Okay, well, nobody's going to question you liking the Beatles because they're quite popular. And they've also been influenced by vegetarian diets.
Good point. Yeah.
It's just, I'm just thinking because of the music that I was influenced by from my parents, and that was really old. I'm thinking Doris Day.
Oh,
it was a long time.
Love that too. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, so we have a few minutes left, and you said you had your book read by some teenagers as well and got some feedback. I'm curious, what did they say?
They both well, there's some I haven't talked to directly, but the feedback I got is that they read through it very quickly and really enjoyed it. And and two of them are not vegan kids, so, and still really enjoy the book. This is not a preachy book. It's not meant to turn anyone vegan or anything like that. You read it, and it's not supposed to be this message. It's not something that someone outside of veganism is going to call vegan propaganda for your teenager or anything like that. It is purely just a story, and I think anyone can connect to the themes of compassion in this story. If that sparks ideas for them to try going vegan, then that warms my heart, and I would absolutely be overjoyed. But that is not the purpose of this book. The purpose of this book is simply to have a upper middle grade reader with a vegan protagonist available to kids who are ready for that.
I like to say that it's a lot easier to go vegan when you're young rather than when you're older, because when you're older, you have this foundation, you have this belief system, you have all this history, and it's really harder. It takes a lot more courage to go back and say, oh, I did all of this wrong.
I think there's a lot of unlearning to do.
Unlearning.
True. It's true. Kids who are raised vegan have no idea how, to them, it just seems like the most simple, natural thing in the world.
But it's great to have a story to support someone who's being vegan and see what they're going through and how other people perceive them. I think there was a lot of support in this book for the vegan teen in this book, and where people were wanting to make sure there were vegan snacks for her, and her parents were supporting and looking for fun things. And unfortunately, that doesn't always happen for the teenagers that want to be vegan.
It doesn't always happen. And in the book, there were some points where she referenced her dad not making an effort for vegan meals and things not tasting very good that he would make for her. And, I can totally feel like that, in this book, only has to live with her dad part-time, but full-time, that would be really difficult, I think, unless
they could learn and grow together.
Well, exactly. And I feel for those kids out there going at it without support. And
so this book might be a nice little lifeline for some of them.
It could be, I think. Yeah. And to be honest, I think most people want to help. Most people want to support someone in their goals and things that are important to them. At least they will pretend to. I've never come across anyone who is outright unsupportive of me or my children being vegan. People have mostly been extremely kind and helpful and going out of their way to make sure there are options, just as we all do for the kids with peanut allergies and gluten intolerances. It's almost like there's a handful of dietary things in every in every group of kids these days.
That's actually a positive thing that's come out of an unfortunate thing with all of these food intolerances and allergies and diseases that we have to be sensitive to, but that helps us vegans because people are more aware of food and what's in it and what isn't.
Right.
Okay. What about animals and your connection with animals? Do you have companion animals in your family, or have you, because there is a special part of the story, it's kind of magical, where Kessa is relating to the life around her, animal life around her.
We do not have any pets. My husband's very allergic to pet dander. My older daughter, while she absolutely loves cats, is also allergic to pet dander. And so we've never had pets in our home, but I grew up with cats. And I would say I'm probably a cat person. So the connections in this book were not out of personal experience of relating to those particular animals, but just in general, I feel like kids are able to make connections with animals very easily and naturally, and it becomes a big part of their lives. I didn't realize how important one of our cats was until she died when I was in second grade, and it absolutely devastated me. I'd not been prepared for that at all. And I think it's one of those things that every kid who grows up with a pet will leave that relationship with that experience. But it was you, and it changes you,
Yeah. Well, we have a problem in our society where we're very disconnected from nature and from the other animals that we share this planet with. And there's that nice connection with the animals in the story. And there are so many important things that you tie in with the story about gardening and nature and just the lovely relationships between these teenagers that are discovering things about life and growing up. I really loved reading it.
I'm so glad. I really want people to know that this is not a story that's just for vegans or for teens or for kids. Anyone can enjoy this book. Many adults have read it and said they loved it and they liked going back to that time. It's probably not something that we as adults really spend time thinking about, but it's there and it's still in our hearts, and it was a critical time in shaping who we are as people. So
are you thinking about a series or a follow-up to this book? Because there are some open-ended
I did leave it open-ended. Not just for the possibility of the sequel, but because I like books that end like that. So there is, it's nice that there's a possibility for that. I would say I would probably respond to demand for a sequel, but I mean, this just came out and I don't know what that will look like, but we'll see. It's definitely a possibility. Although everyone who's read it has said, when are you going to write the next book? I read the book to my daughter and she was like, oh my God, Mommy, you have to write the next book. Can you start writing it right now? And she loved it. She absolutely loved it.
I could see it. Okay. I don't gush all the time about things like this, but I think it was really well written. I think it was a great story. I definitely would like to see another, and it could also make a great film.
Well, hey, if you have any connections in the industry, I'm willing to collaborate.
Anyway, 100%.
all good. I'm a very visual person. I'm an artist. Everything is, I get rich visual imagery. So it's not something I haven't thought of in my mind. It would be very adaptable to a film. But in my mind, I already was seeing that through a camera lens as I'm writing anyway, because that's how I
I got that. I got that very much.
Okay. Wow.
Okay. Great. Well, Christen Mailler, author of Vegan Teen, and just so you know, average is in there, but crossed.
Average Vegan Teen. Yeah.
Average Vegan Teen. Thank you for joining me today. And thank you for this book, which gave me a moment of pleasure. And I hope a lot of people read it and that you write another and it becomes a movie.
Okay. Well, you know what? I am sending those vibes out there because I would be over the moon if that's where this ends up.
Okay. Very good. Well, thank you for joining me today on It's All About Food, and all the best to you and Casey and your children and your book.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. This was fun. Bye-bye.
And that's another episode of It's All About Food. Thank you for joining me. I'm your host, Karen Hartglass. You can find me at responsibleeatingandliving.com. Send your comments and questions to me at info@realmeals.org. Keep reading. And remember, have a delicious week.